Welcome everybody to another episode. Today I am with ImpactQA's very own CEO, JP Bhatt, and today we are discussing the future of QA and ETRM, AI, GenAI, and autonomous testing. JP, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on this podcast, Gabby. I'm JP, founder and CEO of ImpactQA. We've been working in the energy and commodity trading space for some time now, and would love to talk about how AI and Gen AI is impacting the way modern day commodity trading platforms are implemented and tested.
Awesome. So you mentioned you've been working in the energy and commodity trading space for a while now. How are you seeing the rise of modern CTRM platforms?
Okay. So these modern day commodity trading platforms are being shaped not just by technology trends, but by fundamental shifts in how energy is produced, traded, financed, and regulated. And in the last few years, with the turbulence, whether it is geopolitical or the wars that are happening around the globe and change in the governments has sort of added more to that. And there's a massive global move towards renewables, storage, and carbon neutrality. We all talk about it all the time. You see that in news. Power or gas or even oil traders are increasingly handling hybrid portfolios. They used to handle only, let's say, the power or a gas portfolio, but now they've gotten into these hybrid portfolios thanks to the push towards renewables and carbon neutrality, and that's where solar, wind, and carbon credits, fossil battery, all of that is coming into play. And in recent years, with the rise of DERs, what's also known as distributed energy resources, virtual power plants, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. They've added a whole new spin to the already complex market of energy trading, and because of which the scope of modern day CTRMs is increasingly becoming complex. They were already complex, but now it has sort of added more complexity to it. Let me explain that with an example. Let's consider a DER, and DR is, in a simple layman term, it is, let's say, a rooftop solar unit or a biogas unit, for example. What these have done is they've turned consumers into what we now call as prosumers. So prosumers are the ones like people like you and me, Gabby, who are not only consuming energy, but we are producing energy,
Mhm.
producing by having, let's say, like I said, a rooftop solar unit. So what that does is, for example, in some countries like Australia, some parts of Europe, and if I remember, some parts of US, if I'm not wrong, and India included, um, you can feed that excess energy that you're storing via these solar panels into the grid for an energy trading firm, not an energy trading firm, but an energy firm, I would say, which then can sell it to let's say, a local school or a neighborhood shopping mall. So 10 years ago, who would have thought that a neighborhood with, let's say, 500 single family house, they would then gather this electricity or power and then sell it to a neighborhood school, for example. So you can imagine how energy that was until a few years ago, it pretty much used to be a thing that was meant for corporates, if you really look at it, or an enterprise, whether it was a private or a public enterprise. All of a sudden that's becoming retail, and you've given energy in the hands of consumers. So you and I can literally participate in this. Now, putting that in the context of what impact that would have on the modern day ETRMs, obviously, because now the landscape is changing and will continue to change, ETRMs must now handle intermittent generation, non-dispatchable, high resolution, 15 to 5 minute, sort of with granularity, these transactions, these modern day ETRMs are now integrated with forecasting engines, ISO market APIs, real-time optimization models, and then it goes beyond trade capture plus risk into, let's say asset optimization or scheduling, renewables balancing. When you look at these traditional CTRMs that are out there, the likes of Endure, Allegros of the world, and not just these, but yeah, the modern ones also, they're now adding renewable asset modules and carbon management dashboards. And just for the benefit of audience, Gabby, I spoke about VPP, virtual power plant. It's very similar to, let's say, it's a digital, what should I say, aggregation of small DER, small distributed energy resources, like home batteries and rooftop solars and EVs, thermostats, obviously coordinated through a software to behave like a single flexible power plant. And a real world example of a VPP, let's say, could be a Tesla VPP, for example. And if I'm not wrong, they have some in California and some in Australia, as far as I know. And there are some VPP, the home batteries ones in Germany, again. And then some companies like Duke Energy and National Grid, they're aggressively building these VPP platforms. So to answer your question, these complex commodity trading platforms are no longer the way they were, let's say, 5 years ago. That landscape is changing. Yeah.
Great. So this is really interesting stuff. And this leads me to another question. This one's going to be a bit more technical. Since these trading platforms are complex, I'm sure implementing these platforms is not easy. So in fact, ImpactQA helps energy trading companies in implementing and testing these platforms. So my question for you are, how are AI and Gen AI transforming the implementation across leading ETRM systems?
Sure. Traditionally, these ETRM implementations were sort of considered big accounting systems for trades. That's how the world would see these complex trading platforms. But with AI and Gen AI coming to the fore, they are now becoming and with the changes in the way these platforms are now being developed and the needs that are generated, they have these systems of accounting systems have now are now becoming into an intelligent decision platforms that literally sit at the center of a trading stack. Let me break it down by how these implementations are changing across major platforms. And again, when I say these major platforms, the ones that are from Ion Trading or SAP CM, for example, Endure, Allegro, Right Angle. The implementation of these platforms would start, with endless business requirement documents, workshops, static processes, maps, and then very similar to how a traditional software, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago was, waterfall model and then agile came in, but still very traditional. But with Gen AI and AI, you can literally turn, let's say, a 50, 100-page process document into finer user stories, and you can literally configure your requirements for, let's say, any of these platforms like Endure or Allegro. Um, your teams, project and product teams can use Gen AI to generate a first cut review instead of, first cut of these requirements, these user stories instead of writing it from scratch. AI can also propose full set of pricing, credit and liquidity scenarios based on historic volatility and stress events, which otherwise would be very hard for, let's say, you would really have to rely on the memory of an SME, and God knows how good that memory is. So AI helps you do all of that. Um, Most ETRM projects, by the nature of it, they they blow up on data. They're very data intensive. They would capture trade history, curves, reference data and feeds. AI actually is now being embedded around that. So what it does is you have these ML models, machine language models that can detect any inconsistent mappings. Um, let's say when you are migrating from a legacy system or a spreadsheet, and there are many trading firms that still are running on spreadsheets. So if you're moving away from that legacy system to, let's say, an Endure or an Allegro, or let's say moving from one platform to another, and we're actually helping one of our customers move from one trading platform to another. So that's where the best use of AI comes in, where you can use these ML models to detect any inconsistent mapping, and that makes the job of a let's say a business analyst or a trader um, fairly easy. Otherwise, it would be a very complex job for them. So that is how you're using AI and agentic AI from a front office perspective. Again, a trading platform mostly is comprises of three sort of parts: front office, middle office, and back office. If we talk about front office, Gabby, AI optimizes bids into, let's say, a day ahead, intraday, or ancillary markets, subject to any asset constraints, and that way you're helping in bidding and offer optimization. In case of middle office, for example, trading firms are, and I think that's where GenAI is actually already delivering some visible wins, in my opinion. Um, Trading firms are using GenAI to automate, let's say, the assembly of complex risk or position reports that come out of their ETRM stacks, and that helps them cut manual work hours, per workflow, for example, making an intraday reporting literally instant that would otherwise take a lot of time. So that's where AI is helping the middle office save a lot of time. And on the back office side of the house, LLMs, the large language models, they compare, let's say, a counterparty confirmation and, let's say, a master agreement against the ETRM terms. And you can, within seconds, you can spot any discrepancies and before any settlement is made. Exception handling is another area where AI, artificial intelligence, can watch out for recurring settlement exceptions like price mismatch or taxes, fees, and it can also suggest root cause and fixes. Now that's front office, middle office, and back office. But how do an ETRM developer use AI and Gen AI? They can they use it for, let's say, writing scripts, reports, interface mapping. They can use AI assistants to read vendor documentation, code bases to propose patterns. From a QA perspective, and that's an area very close to my heart. You can use AI to write test cases or create test scripts on the fly. You can use the power of Gen AI, agentic AI, to self-heal the regression test scripts. Look for heat maps, potential areas where the platform is prone to failure. And as you would know, we have an in-house tool, Next AI, that uses the power of artificial intelligence and a lot more that goes behind the scenes, Gabby, to generate test cases on the fly, and you can input a requirement to this tool, and what it does is it would spin up a modified test case, and would also provide the right set of test data. And CTRM test data is notoriously hard. Um, um, you know, in general, the structured products, multi-leg trades, RECs and profiles and losses and storage options, all that test data is very difficult to sort of comprehend and then create also. With agentic AI, you can you can generate realistic forward curves, for example. You can produce trade populations that mimic actual book behavior, right? You can auto calculate expected results for pricing and P&L. So there is a lot that can be done using AI, and then I think we're still this commodity trading industry is still scratching the surface. But as we move forward with using some of the advantages that AI and agentic AI today provides, I think the future, there's a lot more to do when it comes to automating, whether it is testing, writing the code, running these trades. There's a lot that can be done. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's dive into the quality assurance of these platforms. Is it true that the traditional QA approaches fall short for today's CTRM and ETRM complexities? If yes, can you explain to us why?
Not just for these commodity trading platforms, but for other software also that's out there, these ERPs, complex ERPs, or any enterprise application. It's absolutely true and widely recognized that the traditional QA approaches would fall short for today's CTRM and these ETRM platforms like Endure or Right Angle or any of uh, these platforms that are out there, because they have evolved dramatically over the last few years, and hence the old QA playbook, which basically means manual test cases, spreadsheet driven scenarios, and then basic UI automation. It won't keep up with the way these complex platforms are changing. Bear in mind that these platforms and these ecosystems are no longer single systems. They're rather, integrated platforms. So, and it involves, let's say, an ETRM, an OMS, and a risk engine. A market data vendor like CME comes into play. Scheduling, ERCOT, PJM, MISO, um, pipeline, rail, terminal feeds also come into action. And then you've got most of these platforms, as you would know, they interact with, on the back end, they have, let's say, an ERP, mostly SAP, for example. And then you've got these these software and latest these products are sitting on top of these complex trading platforms for analytics, for example, BI tools and data lakes. So very complex, very interwoven ecosystem. So traditional way of doing QA won't really help. Um, it's manual test cases, for example, would not capture the cross-system dependencies and timing sensitivities. For example, real-time analytics. You have to have the way, for example, trading works on a oil commodity would be very different than, let's say, how a metal commodity or a agri commodity would work. And in the commodity trading world, where P&L changes every millisecond, uh, QA cannot stay manual, and obviously it can be reactive or spreadsheet driven. So AI driven QA is no longer optional. You have to use AI to do the testing.
Awesome. With that said, JP, can you also help our audience understand what autonomous testing means and how it elevates testing from manual to intelligent?
Sure. when you look at the way manual testing was performed, and again, I'm talking about, let's say, 20 years ago, and even today, there are many companies, many enterprises that are still heavily dependent on manual QA, very traditional, I call it Stone Age way of doing testing where you're looking at the requirements and then you're writing the test case, creating test data, obviously, and then once you have some sort of a product UI ready, you run those tests, you log defects, and of course you use some tools here and there. You're still doing a lot of it manually, so a lot of heavy lifting there. You're maintaining your regression tests, so it becomes a very human intensive, a slow, inconsistent, shallow coverage. There is hardly any depth or breadth in that testing. And obviously, it's expensive. And when it comes to these complex commodity trading platforms, it fails for these complex profit and loss scenarios, the curves, the multi-system flows, because these CTRM systems are complex. Now, automation testing, the traditional automation testing, right, would address some of the pain areas of manual testing. You use tools like Tosca, Selenium, Cypress, and there are tons of other tools that are out there. But it is still very manual heavy because you're still writing your test cases, and it's been written by humans. We are working, for example, with one of these commodity trading companies where there are no test cases and we are being asked to automate the platform. Now you can't really automate the testing unless you write those test cases, so test cases would still be manually written, test data would still be manually created. And when these tests eventually would fail, whether it is a manual test or even if it's an automated test, you still have to do the manual sort of debugging. And then we all know that these automation scripts, they fail frequently if it's a CTRM UI, and then the whole coverage thing is very limited, and you're probably restricted to happy path scenarios also. But that's where, given that manual testing is very human intensive, automation comes in, but it's still, there's a lot of manual dependency there, whether it's writing test cases, creating test data. But that's where autonomous testing is, in my opinion, the future. Autonomous testing is powered by AI and now agentic AI. And it's all over you read about it all over the internet. It's a self-driven, it's like a self-driving test system, right? Those autonomous cars, similar to how a self-driving car would navigate you using sensors and the rules and everything that is fitted into it. In a similar way, autonomous testing would introduce agentic AI that can read the requirements, so you don't really need humans to do it. Also, although you may need some human in the loop there, but most of that heavy lifting is now done by agentic agents, test agents that would understand your requirement. They would generate those test cases, they look at the requirement. Even if you draw a workflow on a piece of a napkin, you can literally create a script out of it. Such is the power of the technology today. You can execute those tests independently, create realistic runtime data, and then these agents can self-heal the broken scripts. They literally act like a human, with a lot more sort of intelligence already fed into them, and they know exactly what to do when a certain thing happens. And you don't have to be awake whole night waiting for some failure to happen and then jump in. These agents kick in as and when something happens, and very automated. They can interpret logs and failures. They can rerun tests, so they know when to rerun a test when they've self-healed a broken script. So that amount of intelligence is fed into these agents, automated agents, and they are continuously learning from the past behavior, and their learning is much faster than a human would, you know. You don't have to worry about a human falling sick or calling in sick, or, you know, the vacation, you know, a person would take. These agents are literally working round the clock, just like a human would do without getting tired. So, uh, you know, the testing, it's a, you know, these agents are like, you know, they're thinking, adapting, and operating pretty much like a human tester, but at a machine scale. um, as an example, a trade, you could use these agents to what you would call as a trade agent, right? So a trade agent would, let's say in the CTRM, commodity trading world, would book a deal, and then a market data agent, let's call them a market data agent, would load a curve. The pricing agent comes in, that they would validate a MTM mark to market. A risk agent comes in, checks for sensitivities, and a settlement agent comes in and validates invoices. So how cool is that? You've literally taken out, and that's where this industry would eventually move towards. Um, yes, there will be human in the loop, but a lot of it would be performed by these agents. The level of orchestration, that level of orchestration, in my opinion, is not possible with classic automation. So, in summary, autonomous testing fixes, you know, itself. You know, an AI would recognize any new changes in UI structure, for example. It would regenerate a test step. So if something changes, it knows that a test step needs to be added, let's say between step 17 and step 19. So it would slip in a test right there. And you know, that's something our product also does. You it generates a test case. You feed a requirement document to it. It looks at the requirement. It clearly knows what change and where to make that change in that particular, let's say, 18 step or a 20 step script. Such is the power of these large language models and AI and Gen AI that people are using today. So yeah, there is a, you know, in summary, obviously, autonomous testing would transform QA from a manual, human-driven, uh, human-driven activity to a self-driven, intelligent system that can test these complex platforms as deeply, the depth and breadth, and continuously as a trader, you know, working 24 by 7 would operate them.
So you've given us an exciting overview of commodity trading platforms and the business around it. You also spoke a little bit about the complexity and the need for QA of these platforms. So here's the final question I have for you. What advice do you have for a head of trading, CIO, or business owner who is in the process of getting a commodity trading platform implemented?
Sure. When we work with commodity traders and the CIOs, and they are trying to bring in a platform, let's say if they're on a um, legacy system, or they're still using spreadsheets, and they're, you know, sometimes you sort of follow the herd mentality kicks in, because your competitor has just implemented one commodity trading platform doesn't necessarily mean that you have to also follow them right away. My advice to them would be, start with a why, you know, clearly define the business outcomes. What are you trying to achieve by implementing a commodity trading platform? There are several of them out there. Do you really need it at that stage? What platform would you want to use? There are the ones that would take you from point A to point B and C and D, but then there are ones that would do a certain part of commodity trading and not the other side of it. But you will have to look at what is it that fits to your need. Is it the better visibility, let's say, into positions across geographies and commodities? Or are you looking at compliance and audit readiness? Or let's say faster and more accurate P&L and exposure reporting. So depending on why you want to implement a platform, you would want to then look at what is out there available. So it's important that your team has to articulate these outcomes literally in one sentence. Otherwise, your implementation would fail. So that's one piece of advice. The another one would be um, I've seen many business owners and let's say CIOs and head of trading try to automate everything. My advice would be simplify before you automate. Most organizations they try to automate their broken processes, and that doesn't really help. You have to first sort of take a step back. You need to look at the problem from 35,000 feet, slice and dice it, simplify it, and then see what parts would you want to automate and what parts, even if they can be automated, may not make a lot of sense to automate those, in the first go. You can do a phase wise sort of an implementation. So whether you're configuring a system like Endure, Right Angle, whatever, you'll have to map your workflows and then see what part of that would you want to automate. Is it trade capture or scheduling or settlement or risk reporting? Remove, my suggestion is remove unnecessary steps, use standardized templates. A simplified process, as we all know, reduces both cost and time to go live. So keep it simple. Another one would be invest in the data readiness. And we all know if you're trying to use AI and machine learning, it's all data dependent. So unless you're if you have bad data behind the scenes, you will not be able to use the traditional or the software that's out there that helps you use the power of AI. So make sure that you're investing heavily in your data readiness. Um, and last but not the least, do not underestimate testing. CTRM systems are complex. They are, like I said earlier, they are deeply integrated with the ERPs, mostly SAP S/4HANA, risk engine, the BI layers, multiple newly written software and products sit on top of reporting, mostly for reporting and analytics. They sit on top of these complex platforms, hence hence they add more complexity, and therefore it is important to make sure that you have a test strategy in place. You are bringing in the QA team sooner in the implementation life cycle. Your QA team is also looking at the requirements. They are writing test cases. They are working very closely with the business. If they can use tools that are out there for generating test cases, test data, great. If you do not have the luxury of using those tools and you still want to do manual, nothing wrong in it, but make sure that you're involving your QA team much early in the software development lifecycle.
Mhm. Well, thank you, JP, for your time. Today's discussion made it clear that AI and Gen AI are no longer optional in the CTRM space, and they're quickly becoming the operating system of modern trading. With that being said, we really appreciate your insights and look forward to continuing this conversation as the industry transforms.
Thank you, Gabby, for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Awesome. All right, we'll talk to you next time.